Hi, everybody. It's Mike from Hear the Watchman, and we're back on this week. We just got back from the wedding in Dallas, Texas, and a beautiful wedding. But today, we're going to talk again to Field McCONNEL. Field is out there on the edge. He's a truther. He speaks all the truth. He doesn't. He digs into it, and he gets the real intel, and he knows what's really going on out there. And I wanted to bring him on today. He has a new brief that he's done, and it's called the Kelly Brief on 5 Eyes of Treason. Further, the Serco Manchester bomb, Clinton Federal Bridge, and the Demon Cabinet League. Field, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, you're very welcome, and I'm sorry for the difficulty in communications, but we're on now, so what can I do to accommodate your listeners?
Well, listen, Field, we want to get into it, and I want to talk about this briefing you did to the Honorable John F. Kelly, who, folks, is the Secretary of Homeland Security. In this brief that you put together, you talk about the Serco Manchester bomb network. Talk to us about that, Field.
Well, on the day that the conference that myself and my British wife, Denise, attended, which was AV8, on Monday, the 22nd of May, there was a bomb that went off in Manchester, and it's my opinion, not that my opinion matters, that was to drive the British people to thinking they need even more security to be delivered by their government. And keep in mind, against this Manchester bombing, which stinks to high heavens, there's an election, there's a irregular election that's been called for by the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Her name is Theresa May, Theresa with an H, and the Manchester bombing bears some signature of a false flag. Now, am I saying it's my opinion it was a false flag? No, I'm not, but it's very conveniently timed if you're trying to sway an election. And this same Prime Minister from the United Kingdom, Theresa May, the same Prime Minister that called for an early election, thinking she would galvanize support, she may benefit from this Manchester bombing, although she's got downside too, because she's cut, I think she's cut 20,000 policeman jobs. And when I say policeman, I mean the metropolitan type police. That's a specific title in England, which we interpret differently. I'm meaning the US definition of a metropolitan police force. In this case, they had police positions cut, 20,000 of them across England during Theresa May's participation in the government. And now she's calling in 5,000 military troops to make sure that the streets are peaceful. We can relate this to in our country under the previous administration. Some of our streets were anything but peaceful. And I allude in this case to the Aurora issue in Aurora, Colorado, followed by the Cudahy, Wisconsin issue, followed by the Sandy Hook, Connecticut issue, followed by the Boston bombing issue, where certain political entities do benefit in their attempts to galvanize their control of their constituents and their people when they have a very terroristic-like event happen, whether it's caused by terrorists themselves or by someone brokering terrorism services, which are done. And I don't have it in front of me, but I've got several corporations to share with you after the show, and I will put the names of those corporations in the comments section of this YouTube. The corporations are centered in the United Kingdom and Switzerland, and they basically tie insurance and reinsurance corporations to terroristic events. And it's my opinion, clearly stated at this time, which is 11:36 Central on the 31st of May, it's my opinion that for the vast majority of the last 4 years, the terroristic events that I'm familiar with were all caused by the people in control of the nations where those terroristic events occurred, be that US, UK, France, Germany, or other places. The people that have gripped the world with their oppressive government for the last several hundred years fully understand that they're exposed, and they're trying to galvanize their grip before they lose it altogether. And there are certain organizations, yours being one here, the Watchmen, Caravan to Midnight, the UK column, the Alternative View series of conferences, and also that's over in the United Kingdom, and then Able Danger Private Intelligence. All 5 of our organizations are doing everything we can think of to expose the truth and to share the truth from a biblical standpoint, that these evil deeds and these egregious acts of oppression against we the global people, they're not going to succeed, that God is still in charge. He did create the world. He does control the world. And these evil people are trying to scare all of us. And, you know, unless they do scare all of us, they fail. And they're not scaring me. Are they scaring you, Mike?
They don't scare me. I mean, we're used to being out there in the front. So let me ask you this. In the entire article, you talk about Five Eyes. Explain to our listeners what the Five Eye countries are.
Okay, it's the United Kingdom, Canada, the United States, New Zealand, and Australia. And they're basically the English-speaking large nations that have large militaries, and they share intelligence. And so when you see and just for your listeners who haven't read the document that's in front of you, although I think I can probably post the whole document on your YouTube so people can read it. If not, I can certainly give them a link to it, or perhaps you can. But these Five Eye nations, it's spelled EYES, not a capital I with an S following. So it's the Five Eyes, and it's basically the remnants of the British Empire. And as you probably recall from history, which you would have learned on the street, not in the schools, because they don't teach history in the schools. They teach effectively garbage. But the Five Eye countries represent what 200 years ago was called the British Empire. And 200 years ago and 100 years ago, the British people and their government could claim that the sun never sets on the British Empire. What they meant, that their reach was global, and at some point in the day, it was always daylight, and the daylight would start in the east and go to the west. And so if you were to go over to 0 degrees of longitude, the first part of the empire that would be illuminated in the morning would be New Zealand, followed by Australia, followed by the United Kingdom, and then followed simultaneously by the 2 colonies of the United Kingdom that straddle the 49th parallel, that being Canada on the north and the United States on the south. And I want to give you a bit of history from 1863. It was the plans of those who created the Civil War in our country to have one Rothschild son controlling the northern half of the U.S. That was the ones that were the portion of the U.S. that was represented by the Union soldiers. They were going to be blended into the Canadian colony to the north, and the southern half, the Confederates, were going to be blended into another Rothschild-owned conglomeration, which would have been a French colony in the southern part of the United States. Now, going back to 1863, 64, 65, the elements that tried to destroy the United States of America did not get it done. The same remnants of the same element tried to get it done on 9/11. Once again, they failed. And if we can use the Civil War and 9/11 as, pardon me while the phone rings and I'll get rid of it. There, it's gone. This goes on all day. In fact, you called me 3 times in about a 10-minute interlude. But in fact, I'll turn my phone off. But what we're dealing with today, it's the same perpetrators, the same mechanism, and the same evil party. And as long as I'm attacking this evil party, I might as well throw in that they also did Malaysia 370. And I say that on the strength of the fact that a certain banking entity made $3 billion off the technology they inherited when the Freescale patents, which were represented by 4 of the 20 Freescale employees that unfortunately lost their lives in Malaysia 370. A certain, well, I was going to say billionaire, but trillionaire is more accurate. A certain trillionaire family in Europe got $3 billion from the patent they were awarded after the untimely death of 239 innocent parties on Malaysia 370. And when I speak and I claim authority, any claim I have of authority is simply because I've not been sued for libel. And I've been singing the same song about Malaysia 370 since the very day it went down, which was Saturday, the 8th of March of 2014, which triggered Malaysian government officials and the Malaysian Airlines to summons me to go over to Kuala Lumpur and explain it to them. And I went to Kuala Lumpur and I explained it to them. I'm neither dead, nor in jail, nor a mental hospital, nor under libel charges. So I believe that what I've been suggesting from day one is very accurate, Mike.
Well, I think it's absolutely the truth. And folks, what we're talking about here, Malaysian Air 370, that is the Malaysian Airlines flight that just vanished mysteriously. We're still not sure, you know, with the mainstream media, they've kind of dropped the story at this point. No big surprise there, but they also once in a while come out saying, oh, there was a piece of it found here and a piece of it found there, all just to throw us off track of what Field's talking about. We're going to, Field, when we're done going through your brief, we're going to come back and revisit Malaysian Air 370 for a few minutes. But tell me this, the Clinton Bridge Network, what is that? That right there sounds very frightening.
It should be frightening, but at this point, it should be frightening to the Clintons. And let me just give you an aside, and I hope that you don't mind the way I talk. Apparently you don't, because this is the 5th interview, but I get criticized a lot for going all over the place, but that's because one good question results in 17 good answers. First and foremost, the Federal Bridge Certification Authority, that's FBCA, that was the virtual floating matrix that was utilized on 9/11 to bring all the evil parties. And there, I will put a link to that image also in the comments section. But Able Danger Global Private Intelligence Agency, which wrote the letter this morning to John Kelly, Secretary Kelly, former 4-star general in the Marine Corps. And as you may be aware, there's at least 5 Marine officers that are supporting and empowering the Trump administration as the Trump administration goes aggressively after a large pool of perpetrators. And you mentioned perhaps the 3rd largest perpetrator in the pool, and that is the Clinton Foundation or the Clinton criminal family. And it's my information in a communication out of Canada today that an arrest warrant for one of the Clintons apparently is close at hand. But on the morning of 9/11, there was an FBCA, Federal Bridge Certification Authority, that had, it looks like a great big pizza wheel with about probably 60 people that were, or 60 entities that had participation rights on this control mechanism for 9/11. And some of the more interesting names are 2 big banks. I believe they're Citibank and Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, by the way, stood to benefit because they had a position in World Trade 1 and 2 that earned them money on 9/11. Citibank had a similar arrangement, I believe, off the top of my head. A lot of our military contractors in the United States, most notably, it's not the only one, but the one I want to focus on is Lockheed Martin, because Lockheed Martin had in their employment about that time, and in the years 96, in the run-up to 2001, the name James Comey, C-O-M-E-Y, James Comey. You may recall he spent some time at the FBI and was unceremoniously fired by Trump, who did one of the greatest things I've witnessed in the last year in our government. He fired him while he was 3,000 miles off, and his firing was on the internet before he was aware that he'd been fired. That brings us to today, because we're reading the letter that I sent or that I'm sending to Secretary Kelly, a retired 4-star Marine general who I respect. And he sits atop the Department of Homeland Security, which means he's also in control of the U.S. CBP, which is Customs and Border Protection. And notice in that letter, I don't say anything at all about my British wife being kept out of the United States. But I'm confident that the people at Customs and Border Protection and DHS will put 2 and 2 together and come up with 6.
Well, I'll tell you, and for our listeners, it's, you know, what Field's going through with his wife, who lives somewhere in England, is frightening. I mean, they're trying to get her to come into this country so they can be together, and it's just one hurdle after another, and they won't let her in. And you know, if she was a Muslim, she'd be in 2 weeks, and that's the atrocity of what's going on right now in America. Now, the last thing that you bring up, Field, in your brief, and I find this very, very interesting, and that is the UK Cabinet Demon Leak Network. Now, explain to us, how does that Demon Leak Network work, and what is it that they're truly trying to accomplish?
Well, they're basically trying to accomplish false flags, and the Demon, it's a face recognition software that's been in control of the United Kingdom. And when you say the United Kingdom, you might as well say Serco, which is the largest corporation that most people have never heard of. And I'm not going to put you on the spot. I'll retool this so it doesn't put you on the spot. I believe that you've learned of the Serco Corporation. You might even have learned from us at Able Danger. But Serco is the only corporation in the world that I'm aware of that could have pulled off 9/11 with almost no help, although they had plenty. Lockheed Martin, I've already mentioned, and James Comey, and that leads direct to the Clinton Foundation, which, as you brought up earlier, was the Clinton Federal Bridge Certification Authority. The people in our country and the people abroad that controlled 9/11, which was a false flag, they did it for a very specific reason. They did it with vast resources. They did it with generally good preparation, but they failed on two different critical issues. They had very poor expert help when it came to the flying events of 9/11, and that's how, in fact, 9/11 was rendered impotent, because United Flight 93 was delayed 41 minutes. Captain Jason Dahl in Flight 93 out of Newark suffered an imputed, IMPUTED, an imputed delay of 41 minutes, which prohibited the planes number 4 and perhaps number 5 from hitting targets 4 and 5, which was the U.S. Capitol and Building 7. Now, how do we know it was the U.S. Capitol? Well, we've talked about that endlessly over the last 10 years plus. But when it comes to Building 7, it appears that that must have been a target also, because they had to pull it down even though it had not been hit. And you cannot walk into a building and place vast pre-placed explosives in there in a matter of 10 minutes. It was done long before the event. And yet, once they realized that the evidence in Building 7 was going to expose the perpetrators of 9/11, they had no choice but to pull it, as Larry Silverstein said. Pull it, well, you can't, and that means to have an intentional demolition of the building, which is impossible. You can't do it on 10 minutes notice. It took a long time to get all those explosives into the right position so that when they did detonate it, that it would come down in its own footprint, which it did. And once again, Serco and BBC, which is British Broadcasting Corporation, these are major players in 9/11. How do we know? Well, we know because BBC announced Building 7 had fallen 20 minutes before it came down. So what that indicates is complicity and the use of scripts. Now, I don't want to sound critical of every news person in the Western world. I just want to be critical of the news persons who since 9/11 have lied through their teeth about what happened on 9/11. Look no further than Building 7 to know that the United Kingdom, Serco, and the BBC had foreknowledge of the attacks of 9/11. And it's very visible for the world to see when their anchor woman, James Stanley, is standing in front of a panoramic view of the Solomon Brothers building right behind her. And she reports on BBC Live News out of New York City on 9/11. And now we get word that the Solomon building number 7 has just come down. And clearly in the view of the camera behind her, the building is standing for another 20 minutes. Now you ask about the Demon software. That's a technology that has been developed going back to 1992 through 1996. And it's in the control of the UK government and or the Crown agents, which is a term that you're probably familiar with, but most of your listeners would not be, so let me explain that. Crown agents historically have been people who've been entrusted with managing the assets of the monarch, be it a king or a queen, and we're speaking of the UK monarch. So in this instance today, Queen Elizabeth II is the monarch, and the Crown agents are charged with keeping her informed and handling business in her vast holdings. But it appears to Abel Danger, and I'm not going to tie anyone else into this other than myself and the principles of Abel Danger, but we believe the Crown agents have gone rogue, and we're not sure that the Queen of England is being kept abreast of what the Crown agents are doing and who they're doing it to, and who is helping them in these egregious oppressions of humanity in the interest of greed and control. However, the Demon facial software is in the control of only a small handful of people, and it's our opinion. And I invite General, I'm going to call him General John Kelly, and that's out of respect. He and I and Mad Dog Mattis and Joseph Dunford, who's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and another fellow recently joining the Trump administration, Major General Ailes, A-L-L-E-S, a fighter pilot. There's 5 Marines that are trying to support Trump so that he is safe, as he is given credit for, just to use a cliche everyone recognizes, draining the swamp. And Abel Danger's participation in that matrix is doing just what we're doing today, which is informing the other 4 Marines and their boss, President Donald Trump. We give them intelligence that the US intelligence agencies either cannot or will not and have not given Trump. Now, Trump has 18 intelligence agencies that I'm aware of under his control or his command. Well, I don't know why he needs 18, because it looks like today we're the first one of the intelligence organizations to let DHS Kelly and his boss, Donald Trump, know that the leak of the leaked material that was linked to the White House that caused General Kelly either yesterday or the day before to appear on an interview where some newscasters were asking him, why is it that these leaks are coming out of the White House? General Kelly was clearly surprised and disheartened, thinking that the leak did come out of the White House. No, General Kelly, the leak came out of the United Kingdom Cabinet Office. And if and when you and General Mattis, the Secretary of Defense, General Dunford, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Ailes, the Top Gun fighter pilot from the Marine Corps, or Donald Trump's team, if they want me to come and be the face of Abel Danger and explain it in a private setting, I'll be more than happy to accommodate you. And Mike, I got to point out now that if I were to be invited to Washington, D.C. to explain this, I wouldn't be going alone, and I wouldn't be going dressed like I am today. And next time your camera's on me, well, I didn't know I was going to be talking to you, but that's how you work. That's how I work. That's how Caravan to Midnight works. That's how the United UK Column newspaper works. That's how I think you know the name Mark Rutherford, a movie maker in England, and you know the name Ian R. Crane, the Alternative Views. I'm going to come out and say that it's my dream that in 2018, at least 3 or 4 of those organizations will join in a conference either in Dallas or in the United Kingdom, because it looks like we are some of the most committed truth warriors that have only two things in common that I'm aware of. Feel free to correct me if I misspeak. I think we're intensely interested in the global people knowing the truth. I think we're intensely motivated by our calling by Jesus Christ to serve him and to serve God and to serve the Holy Spirit without fear or favor. And I know I speak for myself and yourself, and I believe I speak for the UK column Alternative View. Mark Rutherford, I know I speak for him, and Caravan to Midnight. These organizations all share a common calling, the truth, and we all serve the same Lord. Mike, over to you.
I couldn't agree with you more, and God bless you for saying that to all the viewers today. I want to digress just a minute here too about the BBC and their coverage of 9/11 and Building 7. How, Field, did they explain away that 20-minute gap?
They never did, but one head rolled. I'll give you the guy's name. I don't think you would have heard it before, but whenever I give specific names, you can rest assured if you Google that name, plus the organization, in this case, BBC, plus Able Danger, you will be into the treasure trove of everything that's been published by us about them. So here comes the name of the BBC boss on 9/11. His first name is Greg, G-R-E-G. His second name is Dyke, D-Y-K-E. If Greg Dyke would like to call me at 715-307-8222, he can do that. If the Marines that are supporting President Trump, if they wish to call me, they can do that. Callers outside the US use the +001 call sign, or excuse me, international dialing code, which indicates North America. But I'm a public person, as you well know, and yes, I am discouraged by the treatment of myself and my wife, but I want to make it very clear, I am not complaining about the Trump administration or the Marines. They're the solution. The problem was a guy known as Barry Swatero, Punahou 79, and he and Hillary Clinton, and a woman's name that most of your listeners are not aware of, you are, her name is Christine Marcy with a K, K-R-I-S-T-I-N-E, Marcy, M-A-R-C-Y. These are the people that caused the previous controllers of the U.S. Customs and Border Protection to turn my wife, Denise Clark McCONNEL, away from the U.S. And it was in a cruel and inhumane fashion. She flew for an 8 or 9 hour flight on Delta Flight 11, arriving at Minneapolis, and she was turned away, and she had to hop back on Delta Flight 10 and go back to the United Kingdom 6 days before Christmas. Well, when somebody in any organization anywhere in the world gives me a sack of coal on Christmas, they need to realize that I work for Jesus Christ himself, and that's the Christ that's in Christmas. And so when Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Christine Marcy tried to destroy a Christmas reunion of a man and a wife, they probably picked a fight they couldn't win. And once again, I want to remind your listeners who may not have seen the episode that you did, but it was myself, and there's no ego in myself. Anything I do that is good is because God's called me and armored me to do it. If you want to see where the armor is, it's Ephesians 6:10-17. And basically we're told to stand. And I know you stand for who I stand for. And John B. Wells, who got married this past weekend, he stands for the same champion of truth. So does the United Kingdom, the United UK column, the newspaper in Plymouth, England, who I'll be visiting in the next 10 days. The Alternative View conferences that are run by Ian R. Crane. And by the way, let's talk about him off camera because he really wants to have a U.S. event. And I can't speak for him, but I believe he's prudent enough to be part of a already scheduled event if he were invited. So there's a lot of people around the world that are standing for truth. They are standing for a power higher than human. They are standing for the little people who have no way to stand for themselves. The evil people that have been controlling the United States, the United Kingdom, and indeed the world, going back to a pompous proclamation in 1302. There was a papal bull written in 1302, and papal bull means paper. That's what the bull means. It's a paper written by the Pope. But in 1302, the Pope said that the earth and every human on it are my property. I got news for the popes from 1302 to this moment in time. I'm not your property. I'm the property of Jesus Christ. And if you want his property, work it out with him. Until then, you're going to have to deal with me.
Well, Field, I'll tell you something. I'm very impressed by your brief. I think that the Secretary of Homeland Security, John F. Kelly, if he lays his eyes on this brief, perhaps you'll help him to open his eyes and see what's really going on. I want to finish up today with you, Field, and talk a little bit. We're gonna do some more in a set of series with you about Malaysian Air here in the next month. But I want to know, you are still digging into Malaysian Air, the disaster. You're still looking into it. Is there anything new that you can share? Because the mainstream media is clearly just not telling us anything about this.
Well, I think it might shock some people to learn how they got rid of the evidence of Malaysia 370. Have I explained that to you before? I think I have, haven't I?
Well, let's go ahead and say it again.
Okay, well, when Malaysia 370 was first hijacked electronically at BITOD, it's pronounced BITOD, BITOD. It's an intersection where three airspaces and air traffic control regions co-join. Those regions are Vietnam, Singapore, and Malaysia. So at that point, that specific point over the ocean at BITOD, there exists a potential cone of confusion where the only one of those three countries that would know who was controlling Malaysia 370 would be the country that was indeed controlling it. On the morning of the 8th of March of 2014, that country was Malaysia, but because that's the handoff point, if it were to go north and east, it would go into Singapore airspace. If it were to continue north and west, it would go into Vietnam airspace. But it got turned around specifically at that very confusing point, BITOD. From there, it turned around and it struck up a course which was direct for Kuala Lumpur, which would raise several questions. If the bad people that took it at BITOD intended to do something terroristic in nature, how would that impact Kuala Lumpur? That's an open question, and I have a distinct opinion, but I don't think it's fair to the process for me to share that. I know I've shared it with you before, but it doesn't really matter what the bad guys' plans were, because some good guys, and I believe they were in a military AWACS aircraft. I published the call sign many times, but just to keep open the dialogue, there were three nations that I'm aware of that had AWACS assets airborne at that time on that day in history. Those are the United States, Singapore, and Malaysia. In the case of Singapore and Malaysia, I believe their AWACS assets were E-2 Hawkeye aircraft, which is a Grumman aircraft with a dome on the top. And the US Air Force asset would have been an E-3A or E-3B Sentry, which is a 707 derivative with a huge disc on top. And these three nations and other nations, including Thailand, were involved in two coincidental, meaning they were occurring at the same time, two military international operations, Cope Thunder and Cobra Gold. And I believe it was one of those AWACS that took control of Malaysia 370 and put it on a course initially to the north and west. Then as it proceeded down track towards the Maldives, it would have appeared to neutral or even non-neutral observers that it must be heading to the Maldives. And I think that was a good head feint, F-E-I-N-T, because on that morning at the Maldives was Prince William and Princess Kate. Now, most of your listeners wouldn't know it until this very nanosecond, but when Prince William was in the Royal Military, he was a rescue helicopter pilot. So what better place to window dress him if anybody in the UK had reason to think that this Malaysia 370 was going to end up in the ocean, in the South Indian Ocean, or the ocean to the west of Perth, P-E-R-T-H, Perth, Australia. It would be really handy to have a British Royal helicopter rescue pilot pre-positioned near the intended scene of the crash. Well, problem for the UK and problem for, I'm just going to suggest it could have been Serco, it could have been somebody else, although I can't think of anybody else it could have been. But certainly with God, all things are possible. So there could be another corporation that has the reach of Serco. I'm not aware of them. But the resolution was the White Hats took it towards the Maldives, turned it south, landed at Diego Garcia, where it landed doing an auto land, which is a feature of all modern fly-by-wire glass cockpit aircraft. And not only is it a feature which is triply redundant and therefore virtually foolproof, but when the weather is bad, when the visibility and the ceiling are below certain human capability performance quotients, the crew of the airliner has to do an auto land. They're not allowed to manually participate in the landing. So they're bulletproof accurate. I've provided 60 years of patents of the Boeing Honeywell uninterruptible autopilot. I've got a 66-page document. Any of your listeners can contact me and get. Maybe I'll put that up in the comments section if I recall, and I'm not too overwhelmed today to do it. But once the aircraft landed, Malaysia 370 landed safely on Diego Garcia at 06:51 in the morning. That would be after sunrise, by the way. And it taxied into a Faraday cage type portable hangar. What Faraday cage means is electronic stuff can't see into the hangar. And so if there was a Russian, Israeli, British, French, or US satellite overhead, they might not see that Malaysia 370 was indeed parked with the parking brake set and the engines shut off. And then the worst thing that could happen to the White Hats that took it occurred. When the front door is called 01L, which means boarding door 01 left. When no humans open that door from the inside, then the Brits, the Americans, and the others on Diego Garcia that day had the sad task to open the door from the outside. And when they did, they found 239 dead people. And those people were killed by hijacker number 1, whoever hijacker number 1 was. But the blood is on the hands of the UK and the US because they control Diego Garcia, which received the inbound aircraft. Someday I might be an expert witness called. I know when Malaysia called me down there, I was there for 4 days from the 17th to the 20th of April of 2014. I was told that they intended to have a $1 trillion lawsuit in the case of Malaysia 370. And I was face to face with an individual in a hallway of a hotel when he made that comment. And I said, well, who would the target of the lawsuit be? And I was told it would be Boeing Aircraft Company. And I told him right to his face on that day, I said, well, you'll have me on the other side of the courtroom because Boeing Aircraft Company is innocent. The offending technology is not a Boeing part. And I'm not trying to be coy or evasive. I know which corporation produced the offending part. And I believe I've told you. If I haven't, I'll give you an email. But I think that I'm in a very unique position to do either or both of these two things. Number one, do a documentary film, which might take 2 hours, which would show how any flight, and we could call it Texas Airways Flight 370, or we could call it Texas Airways 2017. It doesn't matter. We could put out a fiction video. We could cram that 7-hour flight into 2 hours, because the vast majority of the time the people were dead and nobody was doing anything except technology was flying that aircraft safely to Diego Garcia, where the dead people were then cared for. They probably were put into some cold storage. I don't know that. But then the United States and the United Kingdom had a big problem, what to do with the evidence. And the answer to what they did was Malaysia 17 went down at about 1735 local near Donetsk, Ukraine, on the 17th of July of 2014. And by some stroke of divine intervention, I had put in writing on the 29th of March of 2014, that the information I would provide to Malaysian Airlines systems would allow them to understand what happened to their airplane. But if they did not provide that information to the global media, then they should expect to have a second explosive event no later than 1900 on the 17th of July of 2014. And it happened just as I predicted in writing. Am I smart enough or powerful enough to cause that to happen? No, but God is powerful enough to inspire me to put that in writing, and the evil perpetrators are sinister enough to use my date, so to give themselves some element of plausible deniability, because they can point the finger and say, well, Field McCONNEL predicted it, why don't you put him under arrest? I'd love to be under protective arrest of Donald Trump, the president, and the other Marines that support him. The United States Marines, for more than 300 years, going back to 1775 when they were created at a bar in Philadelphia, they haven't shied away from a fight. The Marines aren't going to shy away from this one either, Mike.
Well, amen. And Field, thank you for joining us again today on the show. And folks, this is powerful. This is the stuff you need to listen to. Field, before I let you go, how do people get in touch with you?
Well, I used to give out my cell number. In fact, I think if you roll this tape back, you'll find out I did. My cell number is 715-307-8222, but I no longer give it out because my phone rings a lot. In fact, you called me 3 times within about 6 minutes when I was in the post office, and I thought you were someone else that you know. I'll just tell you that the guy I'm talking about is in Texas, and his first name is Chance, and he's got a California number too. And so I didn't realize, I mean, I'm not being disrespectful to Chance, and I'm not sucking up to you, but I cannot handle the phone calls of well-meaning people that really want to support what I'm doing, what you're doing. But the best way, if people want to be somewhat polite and respectful, I would just ask them to please email me, fieldmcc@yahoo.com, because that allows me to sort of perform triage on the messages. And when the message is such that it needs an urgent response, they get one. And if it's something like they're trying to order a belt buckle or a t-shirt or any of the books I've written, well, we can do that, you know, when things settle down. But God himself has the team assembled, and I'm not saying could have assembled it. I'm saying he did assemble it. The team is standing. The team is capable of explaining to those men in authority in the United States of America right now, and we're willing to do whatever we can do to help them resolve MH370, 9/11, MH17, and drain the swamp. And I just want to leave on a positive note. When I spoke at AV8 over in Bletchley Park, the United Kingdom, 2 weeks ago, my wife and I, Denise, exchanged our rings not far from where MI6 headquarters is. And we were married in a ceremony so that our English friends could participate in our joy at our union. And so I can assure you, Mike, and others who love and support the truth, that my wife, Denise, and I will be back together and forever. And we do appreciate the fact that truth warriors and Christian servants like yourself are willing to help get our message out. And I want to give you a giant pat on the back, because today you got it out about 4 hours before Secretary Kelly is going to see it. Now, is that unkind to him? No, not in the least. He can deny any knowledge of me, and he may be wise to do so, but it doesn't make the truth go away. And the truth is that those people who are controlling the world with global pedophilia are well known. I exposed them in a Wisconsin court on the 21st of August of 2014. The people who did 9/11, Malaysia 17, Malaysia 370, Air France 447, and a whole lot of these other discretionary terroristic acts against airplanes, well, you've got some powerful enemies, and you are destined to lose. That's my message to these evil parties, Mike.
Well, amen.
Well, amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today, folks. What we try and do here is we try and bring the truth on the Watchmen's Report on all levels, spiritual and physical, to prepare you for the days ahead. So until we see you next time here on the Watchmen's Report, God bless each and every one of you. Stay informed. Keep up with what Field McCONNEL is saying. Email him. Be a part of the movement. God bless each and every one. We'll see you again soon on another issue of the Watchmen's Report.